Hello, Moshe Gersht, my special guest today, author of a couple books, and somebody I recently got introduced to. I remember it was one of those nice synchronicity or hishgacha pratis moments, where sometimes happens even on social media. And I am very passionate about holistic wellness, and then that kind of was my introduction to then re-exploring my roots in Judaism and Yiddishkeit and especially Chassidus. But I remember like coming into yeshiva, there was that seeming struggle of how do these two, people often call it worlds, but how do these two puzzle pieces connect? And it always hits home when I find individuals like yourself who manage to do that well, and somebody I can model myself after and what I'm going to. So it's really a privilege to have you on the podcast. Thank you for coming on.
Oh, thank you so much. It's a big schus, a privilege and a pleasure to be here.
Mhm. I'd love to start to hear a little bit about your journey and what led you to, sharing all the wonderful wisdom that you have been, whether it's through writing or teaching, and yeah.
Well, thank you. By the way, it's Solomon, right?
Yeah, or Shlomo.
Or Shlomo. That's what I'm asking because I'm
Yeah,
sure people call you different things. I just want to make sure that I'm being sensitive to you. What do you prefer?
Shlomo is good.
Okay. So I was born and raised in Los Angeles, so the other side of the country. It's
Mhm.
a little different than Brooklyn. My family was not Orthodox in any way, a strong Jewish identity, but very far from any sort of religious aspects. And somewhere along the way, my family got connected and plugged in through Chabad. I was around 8, 9 years old. They really kind of like went all the way in. And so by the time it was my bar mitzvah, it was with a black hat and the tefillin and a suit and the whole 9 yards. And I went to a regular yeshiva high school. That said,
What do you
it
mean by regular
was
yeshiva high school? Like it was still Chabad?
no, like a kind of mainstream
Uh-huh.
like American yeshiva high school. They were becoming religious through Chabad,
Mhm.
but it was they were figuring out this whole new world. There was a whole new world for them, and it was
Yeah.
a relatively new world for me. But we were always very spiritual in the home. God was very real. The soul was very real. So sometimes it was Hashem, and sometimes it was God, and sometimes it was neshama, and sometimes it was soul. But it was always the same thing.
Yeah.
Um, and and Torah as a practice didn't really hit me in high school. It was because it was part of school. It felt more scholastic than anything else. It felt like something that you read and studied and spent time with, and there were some good ideas there and some not, but it didn't feel cosmic or divine in that way, and it didn't feel life changing. It just felt like this is part of my culture and part of what we do as Jewish people. I was deeply in love with music at the time. I spent 7 years as a singer songwriter for a rock band in LA.
Mhm.
That was my whole life. We were signed to a record label. We toured the country a couple times, the radio, MTV, the whole gamut of that
Yeah.
music experience.
You share a really wonderful story on the TED Talk that you gave, explaining how that came about.
Yeah, yeah, it was, there was so much hashgacha, synchronicity, and really felt like divine providence. Like a lot, I feel really blessed to have been raised in a home that had that awareness. So I was always looking for it. I never felt alone in the world in this space because God and the force of a loving universal collective intelligence was always part of my frame of reference. I like didn't know a world that didn't have that, so it was always kind of swimming in that flow in one way or another. And then it came to a head when I had to leave. I left the band because someone had asked me how long I wanted to play music for. And I said, until we're successful. And then I wanted to settle down because I considered myself to be a family person. He said, when's that? I said, when's what? He said, when is success? And I told him to grab another drink because he was ruining my night. But I sat with that for quite a while. Like, what does a successful life look like? And my conclusion was that you could be successful at what you do, but still fail at life, meaning you can get the inner part wrong You could have all of the money, and you could have the home, and you can have the career goals, and you can have all the stuff on the surface. But how many people get to all the things on the surface, but are still missing something in
Yeah.
the inner self, in the being? And so that sent me on a journey to yeshiva, where I found myself studying and praying and deeply involved in the world of Torah for the next decade and a half. Like that was my everything, completely,
Yeah.
fully immersed in Yerushalayim.
What you mentioned that your parents were kind of drawn close through Chabad. So when you were bar mitzvah or even growing, it was never introduced to you
We
kind of
davened, we
Chassidus,
davened at Chabad, like
like
yeah,
Chas, like Chas,
but Chassidus, no. You see,
wow.
it's funny. My father, I think, was going to Tanya shiurim and things like that.
Mhm.
He would go to classes, and till this day, I mean, he's very much involved in the world of Chassidus. But it didn't trickle down to me. I went to what Chabad would call a misnagid yeshiva. Yeah, like I went to a regular Lithuanian yeshiva high school, and they were not friendly towards Chassidus. They were not
Wow.
sympathetic to Chabad in any way. In fact, I felt the opposite when I was in school. I was one of the weird ones who was affiliated with Chabad, and like
Yeah.
to me, it didn't make any. I didn't understand it because I didn't see things in a kind of segregated way. It's like Torah was Torah. So like, what do you mean? It's all working together, right? But as I grew up and I matured, and I realized that even within religious spaces, right, there's people have boxes and they create all these different files for where things go. And so when I came to yeshiva, I didn't, like when I was 20, I didn't look for anything in particular. I was just looking for the next step in my own personal growth, in my own personal evolution. I
That
looked at a
was in
couple different,
Israel.
yeah, I came to Yerushalayim. I went to yeshiva called Machon Yaakov, which was up there in terms of better or best decisions of my life. There's like probably a list of like, oh, that's also one of the best decisions. So that was up there too. I fell in love with Torah in that building
Mhm.
when I got there. The culture, the individuals that I was surrounded by, the rebbeim that were there, their general philosophy on life, which was to bridge the spiritual into the physical. It wasn't about escapism, it was about developing your mind, your heart, and your behaviors um, in such a way that you could go reintegrate into society and live a beautiful and deep and profound life. So for me, that spoke to every part of my being. The Rosh Yeshiva there, who's been my Rebbe for the last 17 years, one of the biggest mentors in my life, is deeply rooted in what we would call Pnimius Torah, and the gamut of that space. And I resonated with that. There was something deeper that was happening, and he showed me a unified system within the world of Torah, that it wasn't random and chaotic and spread out pieces of, oh, that's a nice good moral idea, or that's a nice philosophical idea, or that's a nice thought, but rather there was a system behind the whole thing. And if you click and you go deeper and deeper and deeper in, so the more and more you find that the power in the language, the power in the mathematics, the numbers behind everything in the world of Torah, the Kabbalistic system, the spheros, the world of Musar and Machshava, and certainly there were sparks of Chassidus there too. It wasn't rooted in that, but there was that there also. And so it just opened up my mind and my heart to a whole new reality. I just fell in
Yeah.
love. It was unbelievable. It's like, wow, who knew this was here? Why didn't anybody tell me? That was the feeling at the time. I'm like, wow, I can't believe it. Like, what a treasure trove of reality. So instead of coming for a year, I decided to stay in the Torah learning space for about 12 years, where it was 8 to 14-hour days of
Yeah.
learning and tefillah.
Wow. I would suggest to anybody listening to check out your TED Talk because I wanted to ask some questions based on that. I know it was a few years ago, but and just to the point that you just made, and you mentioned at some point along that you kind of changed your vision from music and to going to explore yeshiva and then being exposed to Hasidus, and that kind of helped you redefine what the real vision is, and that's what you started going after. And that really resonates with myself as well as when I started reading reading what's it called? The Three Conditions. But like, so at what point, and like in the talk you mentioned that, this was your vision and that's when you're going after. And I've been in yeshiva now in Brooklyn for 2 years, and I have a vision as well that I've been working on. Like it's kind of, our journeys are somewhat opposite, because I grew up, conservative, and only through the world of, let's say, the new thought leaders that you mentioned, you started reading about, the Eckhart Tolle, the Deepak Chopra, the Joe Dispenza, that helped me, and practicing meditation, re-explore. But I'm like, I want to, experience this vision that includes both of them. But like 12 years, at what at what point? I mean, granted, you went in at 20,
Yeah.
but so when did that vision? We'll maybe make this two parts. When did that vision kind of come about, that you redefined it, and at what point were you like, now is the time to bring all this wisdom I'm learned and put it into a book and share it with the world?
Thank you. I appreciate the question because no one's framed it in that way before. So thank you.
Mhm.
What happened was about 6 years into the journey. So I came to yeshiva.
Mhm.
I learned for 2 years in one yeshiva, then I went to another yeshiva, and then eventually to the Mir yeshiva. And I was going deeper and deeper into what you might call like the yeshiva, the Olam Torah, what they call the world and the system of um, traditional Torah understanding, and a lot of halacha, a lot of Gemara, a lot of Talmud, and beautiful, beautiful, beautiful ideas and beautiful expressions. But I found myself somewhere along the way, I think it was 6 years, maybe it was 7 years into my journey, I found myself feeling disjointed. I found myself feeling inner conflict. Not that I was in an outright war with the ideas I was learning, but more like I felt distant from spirit, a distance from my own sense of self, a distance from my intuition, from the world of synchronicity and miracles that I had known, from the oneness of the universe, a distance from God. I didn't feel plugged in and connected, meaning while I was in front of the Torah, maybe I felt connected. While I was, you know, praying, maybe I felt connected. But the rest of my day, when I was at home or when I was with my kids or when I was dealing with, buying stuff at the market or any other time of the day, I didn't feel plugged in. I didn't feel connected, and I didn't know what, I felt like something was wrong with me. And it was the beginning of a couple of years of emotional unrest, emotional challenging, um, lots of anger. I felt like I didn't realize there was anger inside of me, and it turns out there was. And it took some marriage and some children and some financial stuff and some, misunderstandings in Torah, lots of stuff to come together to bring out that side of me. And I found myself discontented, like a lot of discontent. And then because of that, I then felt shame because I thought I was already supposed to be better than this. And look at me, I'm really such a low person. I must be broken. So I was feeling negative emotions, which then I felt guilty about and shameful over, which led to um, actions or apathy in areas of my life, which led to more shame. And it kind of makes a
Yeah.
snowball effect. And I got further and further and further away from the truth, even though I was sitting and reading all these great ideas, but there was a missing link in terms of integration. So I sat down with one of my mentors at some point, and I let him know that I was going through this. And he said, I'll make a longer story short, but his conclusion of that conversation was you have to go towards Chassidus. Like you need to move in that direction. And this was coming from a person who, he specifically told me to look at Rabbi Nachman and told me to spend time with Chassidim. And Chassidus is obviously a specific sect within Judaism, and it's focusing on consciousness and the role that spirit plays in our day-to-day life and the way that we think, speak, and act, and what we experience, and how that is the constant interplay. It's a path of enlightenment within the world of Torah. And so I think all of Torah is really leading towards an enlightened life, but Chassidus was the a very direct approach to how to transcend the ego and the mind, and to work with the dialectic that takes place between the head and the heart, similar to a lot of what I had seen in Moshe, but it just spoke to me in a different way. And so I started going down this path and really looking deeper into the world of Chassidus. A lot of the Baal Shem Tov, who was the founder of Chassidus, and a lot of his students, Maggid of Mezrich, Ketushas Levi, and the Moreh Naim, and the kind of the foundation stones of this entire worldview of Chassidus, and eventually some Rebbe Nachman and Chabad Chassidus. So it started becoming a new worldview for me. At the same time, I still had my inner struggles. So at some point, I went to therapy, and then that was so much of what I was going through in therapy was actually aligning with what I was learning. I was like, oh, this is what he's saying over here. You're telling me to do the same thing. Oh, that's just in language that is in my generation. This was written 300 years ago in Poland. So like, I guess there's a translation gap. And then I went even further down this path. And at some point when I was 28, now mind you, when I was 28 years old, at that point, until 20, I basically never read a book. I was just playing music. I didn't care about reading anything. I was not an intellectual person at all. And then between 20 and 28, all I had put into my brain was Torah. I did not want to see anything else. I was kind of like in this addict, mentality around. I just want to infuse myself with that wisdom. And when I was 28, somebody handed me The Power of Now, Eckhart Tolle's book. And it was at the same time that I was going through all of this other stuff and therapy and Chassidus.
Sorry to jump in. You mentioned an important part that I think a lot of some of my listeners and even myself, when I got into the world of Chassidus, and you get drawn into the beautiful language and the powerful ideas, but like you said, so you had that inner struggle even still while you were learning that. Then what led to did you realize at some point, even when learning that, like, okay, this is speaking to myself, but it's not like helping me heal the actual problem, that led to this therapy?
Well, what it was almost like I was in a hole, and this had me climbing up a ladder. But I wanted to move faster. I saw that maybe this would help me over time, but I was still struggling. Like at home, I still wasn't the person that I wanted to be. And I never saw myself as a person who needed therapy. Though today I think that everybody should spend time with another human being who understands the inner world, and spend time with a psychologist who can help them find the flowering of their soul. There was a couple of things I needed to work out. It was really helpful for me. I spent a year with one therapist who, wonderful human being. I didn't feel it did anything for me. I think therapy is also like it's a game of finding the right partner there too. Like the right person has to understand you. I was very blessed to find the right person. The second person that I sat with, I instantly, after the first session, I had already had like life-changing breakthroughs, and within 6 sessions, I was already like on a path of real change, because all it did was it allowed me to see the parts of myself that I could not yet see, and then be able to address it in a way that was fundamental. And it was all everything that was being pointed out to me in that space I was reading about in Chassidus, when they would speak about the midos and these different elements that are going on inside of you, and the different things, how to think about it and how to move around it. But there was still this missing link. So it was like trying to put the pieces together by myself in the world of Chassidus, then having the experience of what it was like on the outside. And still, I was going to many shiurim. I spent a lot of time with friends and other rabbis and mentors who were teaching Chassidus, and I would say, oh, like I would learn one thing from this person, and that would be really important in terms of the growth. And I would learn something from here, and oh, that's what this word means. There's a good friend of mine who I spent a lot of time studying with, Daniel Katz, who really opened up just this one word and this one concept of what bittul means in Chassidus, and how to get beyond this world of Yeshus, which that bittul means to, I mean, I guess technically means to nullify, but it means to transcend or to go beyond or to let go, to release. And Yeshus is the ego. And that for me is everything as far as the path, the true path of living an enlightened life, of getting beyond all of the kind of the lower parts of this reality and bringing in a deeper light into yourself. So the combining of those two worlds, plus this person who gave me the Eckhart Tolle book, and then I was like, wait a second, there's a language for this that goes, like a modern language that's literally everything in the book. I was like, I have a source for every single idea in here, in either in Chassidus or in Kabbalah or in Machshava, in the Maharal, the Ramchal, in the Gra, in the Ari, in the Baal Shem Tov, in the Maggid of Mezrich, in the Rebbe Nachman. There's a Gemara, there's a pasuk, there were so many different places where it's everything I saw there resonated as truth from within, and I saw it within the world of Torah, and I was just blown away and inspired. So I said, well, who else is speaking about this? And that's what opened me up to the entire world of what you might call spiritual self-help, the world of well-being. And I went down the rabbit hole of all the amazing, amazing teachers and authors and speakers of that space, alongside all of the Torah that I had been kind of amassing along the way. So it was almost like my day job was Torah, but my side hustle was spiritual self-help. And in between, I was meditating a ton, and I was doing anything that I could to go deeper and deeper into this place. And one day I woke up and I felt like who I was before and then some, like a real powerful evolutionary space. That gives you a kind of a picture of the journey. But to kind of answer your question of like, and when did I know it was time to do more than that? Really, that came for me at a point where I went to go make amends with my band members. It was about 12 years later, and it didn't go well.
What inspired that?
I waited on the advice of one of my mentors. He said I should wait 10 years before going back. Wow. To this day, I think that might have been a mistake, but there are no mistakes in the universe, so that's okay. But as far as a lesson was learned, I don't think I needed to wait 10 years, but he told me to wait, so I did. And then when the opportunity presented itself, I went back to Los Angeles to go meet with them and to speak with them and share with them what my life has been like for the last 10 years and try to make sense out of why I left. And if they wanted a friendship, I'd be open to it. But if they didn't want a friendship, I'd be open to that too. I just wanted to connect. These were the closest people to me in my life, and nobody wanted to hear from me. So I went one by one, kind of tried to go through, and it didn't work out. On the way back from that trip, I had a very powerful experience when I landed, and I didn't know it at the time, but subsequently, what had happened was I opened the door, I walked through the door, and I felt this incredible. It was like a shift, like a full immersive transition, like head to toe, not like a feeling, but like a total shift of consciousness, of feeling all the fear inside of me fall away. It's very hard to describe, but it's almost like if you can imagine having a jacket wrapped around your whole body very tightly, and the whole thing came off. So everything felt open and loose, and things were very vivid and clear in such a way where that maybe the words that were in my head at the time were, I don't care anymore. I was trying to give words to that experience, and those were the words that came to me. Later, I think what that really meant was I don't fear anymore, right? It was this feeling of caring was fearing of what people would think. And I had to actually go through this. It was like a micro ego death, to see that there are people in this world who really don't like me, who really hate me, who are the closest people to me in my life. It wasn't just like, okay, fine, somebody doesn't like you. Okay, it doesn't matter. But someone who you're so close with, for them to never want to speak to you again, it's like, whoa. And then to have 5 of those people in your life that were so close, so much a part of your inner experience, and for them to fall away and fall out in such a way where like, okay, there's nothing that's going to happen there. It was painful and then extremely liberating. It also then informed the next decisions of my life, because where I was standing at the time, I was very inspired by the world of Chassidus, all of Pnimis Torah and all of Torah, but really Chassidus was speaking to me very deeply, and I was having so much of these clarity moments, spiritual experiences, intuitive experiences, synchronistic experiences, and I wanted to share more, but I did feel on some level I felt bound to the system that I had become a part of, and I was deeply, deeply enmeshed in a system in Yerushalayim. And in this moment when the jacket came off, it also came off for that. Like I didn't feel like I had to fear anything anymore. And it was okay. Well, if you could do anything, well, what would you do? And this is what I wanted to do. I just wanted to help people live a more enlightened life. I just want people to live connected to their soul, connected to God in such a way where they're transcendent from the fear and the angst and the worry and the negativity, the frustration and the suffering of day-to-day life. And we have access to that. And so I started writing a book, put this book together, and there's more to the story, but that was the point. That point right after that, I went to, like, that week I was sitting in the shul. I looked up and I said, Hashem, I'm ready. When you give me the download of what message you want me to share with the world, I'm ready to sit and work on it, and I'll put my work together.
Wow, thank you. So there are two things I wanted to kind of talk about, but one thing that did stick out with me in the introduction, you're talking about after, now you were, as you mentioned earlier, you were learning Torah all day, and at night making some time to learn the other things, which I probably want to ask you at some point also how you do that, because sometimes I'm like feel overwhelmed with learning all of this and learning Chassidus. Is like sometimes even just making time to read your book, I'm like, when can I fit it in? But you mentioned that where did I you mentioned that reading all the different work now, misplaced the point, had it, but yeah, you mentioned that the different points of like spiritual traditions, it's like whichever gate you walk through matters less than where you're going. When you dig all the way to the innermost point of every spiritual tradition, you find that they all lead to the same place, the placeness. But when I was kind of getting introduced and learning more about Torah and Yiddish and Chassidus, it kind of felt like it was actually saying the opposite. Like our other traditions, at least for a Jew, because maybe somebody could read this and be like, oh, if that's the case, then I'm Jewish, but let me go check out Buddhism.
Right. So what's the question?
So is that really true that all of them are leading to the same place?
Well, what's the end goal?
The end goal,
Yeah,
Mashiach,
what's the great? What is that? What does the end goal look like to you?
like unity with everything and everyone.
That sounds wonderful. So I'm with you, and um, I think at the deepest level, right? The pasuk says, "Kimala aretz deis Hashem." That's what the world of Mashiach looks like. That the world will be filled with the knowing of God.
Mm-hmm.
That there's an expansive God consciousness that pervades all of reality. Now, it's not that it's not there now, but the way that these Sfarim say it is that the Shekhinah is in Galus. What is the Shekhinah? Is the indwelling presence of God. It's the part of God that is experiential. It's the part of God that we can interface with, touch, taste, experience, and that element of this reality, even as we are in a human, temporal, physical, corporeal existence, right? So we can have a relationship there. But that experience is in Galus. Galus means it's in exile. What does it mean that element's in exile? It means that we are not yet collectively at a place where this higher consciousness pervades all of reality. So one by one, as we awaken and move into that space, back to the deeper connection to what theistically we call God, right? And maybe more New Age terms, they're going to call it the universe or the energy of an infinite intelligence or whatever it is you're going to call it. But what we call Hashem, what we call God, to connect to that eternal presence of reality, that's the end goal. We want that on a collective level, that not just one person is enlightened, but that the whole world has that. And at the core of spiritual paths, right? If I recall in the book, I write spiritual paths, not religious paths, because if you're caught in religion, there might be different, more than just behavioral differences in terms of end goal. But if you look at the spiritual side of all religions, the spiritual path in all places, they're trying to bring you back to God in one word or form or another. It's trying to get back to this place. You'll find in all of them, whether it's Sufism or Christian mysticism or Buddhism, there's a desire to get to this place which transcends the ego mind, the personal mind that traps us in this world. So that's in terms of the spiritual side of everything. And so now to answer your question, well, does that mean that I can go do a different path and get to the same place? As far as the spirit is concerned, as far as the enlightenment, that element is concerned, God is not only found in one place. God is meant to be found in all places. And so hopefully if you're a real Torah Jew, we believe that God is everywhere. So everywhere is the path back to God, ultimately. So Torah is not about, oh, this is the only way that I'm going to get and find my an enlightened perspective on reality, because I can find an enlightened perspective in many places. So your question really is, so then what is the uniqueness of Torah? That's really the question. Like why then, as a Jew, should I look at Torah?
Because you have a lot of people, namely going by Boo Jews, that don't feel well, I don't know if I could say that, I don't have their experience, but seemingly don't have a draw towards the Torah and mitzvahs or
Sure.
other practices that you can achieve a certain level of enlightenment, but not keeping this Torah and mitzvahs.
Yeah, to me, sometimes it feels like Judaism begins where Buddhism leaves off. I feel like every Jew has to be a Buddhist first, right? What I mean by that is fundamentally, the Arizal writes or the Rav Chaim Vital writes in Shari Kedusha. He asks the question, why is there no commandment? There's no mitzvah of developing yourself, of self-development, tikkun midos. There's no commandment for that. And that one's so big, right? Why isn't that there? And he says, because that's a prerequisite. I don't have to command you to do it. Like none of the rest of it is even relevant until you've worked on yourself and developed yourself. And that's the reason why if you look at Torah from a historical perspective, it comes over 2,000 years into, Adam Arishon, man's, the speaking man, into history, because we needed 26 generations kabbalistically, right, to develop the what's called derech eretz, or the midos, the self-development, the inner growth of what it means to be a human, so that we could be a vessel to receive the light of something higher. And so the whole idea, whether you're looking at, and there's many starting points. So if you told me you're starting at Tony Robbins or Eckhart Tolle, or you're looking at Buddhism, or you're looking at self-development, or you're looking at therapy, or you're looking at a 12-step program, whatever it is that's helping you become more human, right? That's always the grounded place, and that exists within Torah also, right? That the Musar movement and a lot of Chassidus was there to help bring a person back to that state of equanimity, where they recognize, oh, now I'm here, and I'm a healthy, developed, balanced, grounded human being that's in a physical, temporal existence. You're always going to get to the question, and now what? What am I doing here? Right? And so the purpose of Torah and mitzvos was to answer the question of like, well, what are we doing here beyond just the enlightenment experience? There's actually work that's happening on this plane. And in the Torah worldview, is there are people here who their job is to bring more of that light into the world. That's their job, right? So you can choose to not do that, and that will you'll have a different life because of that. Maybe you choose to want that life, and you're in this incarnation, you chose to walk away from a Jewish path. That's your experience. You're going to have a different life because of that. But that is separate from the first point, which is, who are you in choosing that life? Most people don't even get to the point where they're even making a choice in the life that they're choosing. A lot of this for me comes back down, like if people ask me, like, where does Torah fit in your whole thing is Torah, so but if you could choose any path, so why is it there? I firmly believe in the Sinai experience. There's enough, I mean, that we could have a whole podcast on that alone. If Sinai doesn't happen, right, the receiving of the Torah, the revelation of Torah, if that doesn't happen, so then they are all the same, even on the surface. Then it's, pick your choose your, happy-go-lucky path in this life and do the best you can. But it did. There was a Sinai experience. God stopped the world, takes the Jewish people out of Egypt, brings them into the Sinai desert. There's a revelatory experience that literally shapes the rest of history. All of Western society, Judeo-Christian society, all of that, ultimately all of Christianity and Islam is also fundamentally rooted in the fact that there was a revelatory experience at Sinai, right? The fact that the Torah is given. So this point in history, certainly as a Jew in this body, in this incarnation, like it resonates to me, it speaks with me. And so if God shows up and says, you might not understand this, but when you put these boxes on your head and on your arm and you put on tefillin, right, it has a powerful spiritual impact in the world and in yourself, right? So the starting point is, okay, I'll take your word for it and I'll try to go deeper into that and figure out if I have that experience along the way. But the starting point is, if that happened, which again, that's probably a topic in its own right, which is, okay, well, how do you know? What are you basing this on that you could make that decision? But that's my starting point. And I think at some point, beyond the spiritual experience or the enlightenment experience, so let's say you're an enlightened being. So now how are you going to spend the rest of your time on this planet? What are we doing here? And Torah is a path for what we're doing here. It happens to also be a path of enlightenment. And I think Chassidus stresses that and emphasizes that more than the other areas that I've seen. But there's also a purpose in this world, which again would lead to a whole nother question of like, well, how do you know there's objective purpose in the world? And that starts with, is there a creator? If there is a creator, my assumption is there's a purpose. If there's no creator, none of this matters anyway. So then do whatever you want. So you understand, like philosophically, we get into really interesting places. Like once we open, each one of these could probably be a whole topic in its own right.
The other paths, though, somebody could choose to go down them, but what's the concern that Torah or even Chassidus often mentions about, or even the Rebbe, the Lubavitcher Rebbe would mention when it came to when he was making recommendations of getting into meditation and all that, but making sure it's all has kosher elements. Like if somebody, as you were saying, chooses these other paths, but they might have different elements of what is Zara, would that just prevent them from getting to a certain level of alignment?
So I think the answer over there is intention is a big factor in all of this. In this, all of spiritual work, what you think about expands. It's a real thing. We see it as non-real, but it's just it exists on a plane, right? And in Chassidus, it exists on the plane of Bria. Yeah, so it exists on a different plane. So we don't see them as real things, but your thoughts matter, your speech matters. Everything impacts this reality energetically. So because it plays such an important role in the whole system. So there were times, I don't know if that's still the case today as far as prevalency, but there were times where you were dealing with a polytheistic understanding of reality or a more paganistic understanding of reality, where in one form or another, you were actually aligning your intention or worship to the energy of something physical, right? The rock itself, the statue itself, the sun itself, the stars themselves, the constellations themselves, the expressions of, it would be no different than if somebody were to actually pray to one of the spheros, right? You don't pray to spheros, right? They are embodiments or reflections of something that's unique and internally unified and one. And so in the same way that if you were to sit and digest food that was, cooked in a way that your body couldn't handle, so the soul is going to have a hard time digesting something which is not in alignment with a higher truth, and that'll be true for anybody, right? At the end of the day, the deepest, most profound experience comes in the recognition of a divine unity in this world, which in Kabbalah we call the Ein Sof, right? Or Ein Sof, the light of God, which is it's the unfiltered, unified, capital G good, capital O one, capital T truth, right? That's what we're looking at. And so you could do these other meditative practices, but the assumption is that it has a filter on it in such a way, right? If you're doing something that has a filter that keeps you blocked off from that one light, you still might be able to get a lot from it, but it might be cutting you off from something deeper, maybe. Again, I haven't gone down that path, so I can't tell you experientially what it's like. I do know people who have gone down experimentally lots of different spiritual paths, and everything impacts a person differently. I've seen people have really powerful and positive experiences in lots of different modalities. I could and probably should only speak from my own personal experience on this, which is that as far as the spiritual experience is concerned, the deepest ones I've ever had have actually come through the immersion in Torah itself. I'm unparalleled, and I've had some pretty amazing meditative experiences in my life, and really powerful synchronistic and magical experiences as far as the unfolding of life. But it's in for me in this body, in this incarnation, which is the alignment of the neshama that fills this vessel, right? For me, it comes through Torah, but it doesn't change fundamentally what everyone here in the world is doing. So I don't care if you're a man or a woman, if you're a Jew or you're not a Jew. At the end of the day, the God force of reality, the oneness, right, that is behind everything and pervades everything, is available to everyone, for everyone, and that you can only get there when you find yourself. If you go deep enough into yourself, that's what you find. So if you're looking for peace and relaxation, so you can try a lot of different modalities, right? If you're looking for how to co-create and manifest things in this world, so you might find a lot of different modalities. If you're looking to return to self and to an enlightened state, that's what I mean by that's the placeless. Like in this world, in the physical world, or even in the energetic space, lots of different things going on. But if you go all the way up, like the way that I see the whole thing is in the word echad, one, in Torah is an aleph, a chet, and a daled. The daled corresponds to the number 4. That represents the physical world, right? In the Zohar in Kabbalah, it describes the Dalet as the physical manifestation of reality, the most outer layer. And that's where most people are caught up most of the time. One above that is the Chet. Chet reflects as the number 8. 8 is kind of the infinity symbol. It's the energy space. It's in between the physical and the unity. It is the spiritual or the energetic space in between. And a lot of people who are on a spiritual path, they move and spend a lot of time over there, right? And kind of like the energies and what's going on, the different kochot, right? And over there, you can have aligned and unaligned energies, because it's still energy. It's not back at the one. And then there's the aleph, which is at the top, the beginning, the foundation of true oneness, is being able to go all the way up till you hit the point where you realize that there's a divine unity, the intelligence, the love, the kindness, and compassion that is all pervasive, the omnipotent, omniscient, right, and omnipresent, the timeless reality. And that is really the source of everything. When you're connected there, then from there you flow back down into the energetic space and into the physical space. So if you get caught on the bottom or in the middle, that's where you come, where all of these pieces of Torah, every single one that talks about dangers of other areas in life, they're speaking about if you're assuming you're getting caught in this bottom or center space, right? At any point when you're reaching all the way back up to the top, right, that's the goal for all of humanity, for all of mankind, is to get to source consciousness, and then to be able to internalize, integrate, and then reflect that back out into this world of the light, with the light, for the light, to the light.
Powerful. And you were bringing up that's the uniqueness of Torah, and it really seems like, at least a little bit from my own personal experience, that it's like what the other practices may get you to a certain height, but the Torah also seems to allow you to like easily come ground back down. Like you're saying, like you reach the aleph, but then you have to be able to keep that or sustain that awareness in the world, and by living in the world as well.
Yeah, I think again, there are there are different paths for different people in this world. One of the beauties and the unique elements of Torah is mitzvahs. The idea that there are things that you do that keep you conscious, connected, and spiritually aligned as you go through life. So when you're walking around, right, and there's someone to help out, and you can give them some charity, or you wake up in the morning and the first thing you say is a gratitude for being alive, and before you eat you're going to sit and you're going to say a blessing, and when you finish you're going to say a blessing, and you're going to use the restroom and you're going to say a blessing. There's 100 blessings that you say every day, like constantly staying connected and plugged in. It's an incredibly beautiful and profound system of spiritual awakening, but what makes it unique is it's for Jewish people, not everybody. Torah is not for everybody. The path of enlightenment is for everybody. The path to God is for everybody. I don't think everybody has to pick up a willow branch and shake it around in the air every September or October, right? Like it's a strange thing even for a Jewish person, right? Mitzvahs don't always make sense on the surface. Yeah, some of them are quite exotic. And so we step into them, and it's a path for me and for those who resonate at that level. And there's something special and unique it does for that soul type. There's a great line that I heard from Richard Alpert, who's more commonly known as Ram Dass, and he said that your incarnation is the blueprint for your liberation, and that really struck a chord with me, because what he was saying, he was speaking about his relationship to Judaism. He himself was Jewish, and Yosef ben Reuben Chaim.
Wow, I was gonna ask about that.
Yeah, and he was once asked why he found enlightenment in Taoism and Buddhism and all these other, and in LSD, psilocybin, and all these other things. And he said because when he was on this path, nobody put Kabbalah or Chassidus in front of him. And had he been handed that, he probably would have come to enlightenment that way. But his path, in his incarnation, somebody handed him the Tibetan Book of the Dead, and that became his path, and he went in that direction, and ultimately arrived at the same conclusions and same inner experience as the Shema, right, which is Hashem Echad, that there's a oneness of God. But his life didn't reflect a Torah-oriented life, right? So there's the inner and the outer of this human experience, the body and the soul of this human experience. And the soul of all of our experiences, that's where our sameness lies, right? Because we are all made in the image of God, with the opportunity to live as the reflection of that light in this world. What we do on the surface is going to look different for everybody. Your incarnation, how you came into this world, you don't need to look somewhere else to find the enlightenment space. More than that is you've been given the gift of this story. That's your story in this life. And for some person, it's going to look like their story is the story of rebellion. And for another person, their story is going to be the story of embracing. And for another person, the story is going to look like a combination of many things. So, but by being open to the fact that your life isn't a mistake, like the family you were born into, the parents you had, the community you were born into, the thoughts you had along the way, your own enlightened thoughts that took place, the class that you sat in, the person that you met, all the things that led to where you are right now are in perfect alignment with a higher order. So being open to that in your process is ultimately, again, if you're sitting there with a mind that's aware and open to that experience, is continually leading you down a path of personal evolution and to this place of what we're speaking about, Mashiach, Gimala Aretz Deus Hashem.
Wow. I'd be curious to hear then a little bit of what you think then by the Rebbe, the Bavarch Rebbe was so pushed a lot of nifsoyim, the idea of going out and almost like kind of being pushy with Torah and mitzvahs. So it's like, but it is kind of like push in your face. So it makes you think about like with Ram Dass. But in other cases, like it kind of comes off with like no, this is the way you got to do things.
It would almost,
going on Mitzrayim myself,
think,
I get
I think, sure, I think that the Rebbe's push for Mitzrayim was if you saw someone who was thirsty and they were dehydrated, they kept drinking coffee and alcohol and not water, you would feel the strongest impulse to go over and say, stop, stop, you're dehydrated, drink some water, you need water, you need water. Even one cup that might help you for days, because the alcohol and the coffee, that's dehydrating you,
Yeah.
right? Like you need water. And what he was being pushed by, or the impulse to say this is the directive we need them to do, is that for the soul of a Jew in this world, um, you put on tefillin, that's water for your soul. How could I not want to give this to you? How could I hold myself back from giving you this? Like, I'm not telling you to even stop drinking coffee and alcohol, just have water also, right? Like, the Rebbe wasn't saying run out there and get people to stop everything they're doing immediately. It was just one thing. The idea is one mitzvah, mitzvah goreres mitzvah. One thing at a time has an impact and an influence. And if you see somebody and you can help them, you can serve them. Again, you have to see things from his vantage point, from where the Rebbe is standing. He sees a bunch of people who, from his perspective, are literally dying of thirst. And so he said, we need to create an army of people who are going out and hydrating human beings, right? Spiritually speaking. And so he's out there pushing it, not from an agenda, not because he's wants to, make you one of his followers. That's not his agenda. His agenda is, I want you to be alive. I want you to live. And from my vantage point, from where I'm standing, my perspective is, if you put on tefillin, if you light Shabbos candles, if you learn another piece of Tanya, if you go out and do another thing, you don't realize how much this is going to do for your life, how much this is going to do for your soul. So today, people might do it in such a way that feels pushy, but I don't think that's where the Rebbe was coming from. I think he was coming from a place of an earnest desire to help people live a more deeply spiritually fulfilling life.
Beautiful. Now that we're in the month of Elul, which is all about, spiritual heshbon, spiritual accounting, and teshuvah, can you share a few tools and tips in addition to reading your books? It's all the same to me, and the three conditions. Well, even like you mentioned that you got into practicing meditation, and that's a big part of my own, a big tool of my own life, using with with healing as well as transformation.
Yeah, I think, gosh, Elul was a beautiful month. It really is. It's an opportunity to come back, right? It's all about returning to the more pure state, remembering that there's a part of us that is not affected by the things that we've done, the thoughts that we've had, the thing that we've said. Famously, the Roshi Tevos, the acronym of the word Elul, Ani Ledodi Vidodi Li, I'm for my beloved, and my beloved is for me. I am for my beloved is the first part. So that is, to the degree that you take the step towards your own spiritual growth, energetically, there's a special time now where it's received and reciprocated in a stronger fashion. So whether that's taking time in this month to just get quiet, I know that for me that's just an incredible tool all the time, to find spaces. It's a very noisy world, a very, very noisy world. And Anila Dodi means I'm going to go spend time with, it's speaking about God, I'm going to go spend time with God, right? And God is not found in the noise. Lo berash Hashem, the pasuk says, God's not found in the noise. So it's really easy to not spend time doing nothing, sitting in quiet. It's easy to not do that. Most of us fill most of our time on this planet. If you think about our days, they're filled morning to night. And if you're not scrolling at something or watching something or reading something or doing something or talking to someone, you're thinking about doing one of those things. So to actually find time to get quiet and to get still, 10 minutes, 15 minutes here and there, and it is a practice, and we call it meditation, but it's a practice of just allowing yourself to be and get quiet. And maybe I'll share with you this last piece, which is Rav Dessler, who was a hidden closet chassid himself. He writes, he brings a quote from the Rabbeinu Tam, and the Rabbeinu Tam says, if you really want to come to know God, you have to come to know yourself. And then he asks, how do you come to know yourself? He says you have to do one of three things. One is either you have to spend time in meditation. Two is you have to get outside of a worldview of taking and be in the mindset of serving.
Mm.
And three is you have to change your primary priority and desire from being one of achieving and doing to one of just wanting to be. So if we can lean into those things, spend some time in quiet, spend some time in service, spend some time just being, I think we'll find a deeper connection to the Dodi, and then the Dodi can be freely.
Beautiful. Moshe, thank you very much. I'm so grateful that Hashem, the universe, put you in front of my face, which led to me getting your book and now having this interview. And I'm really looking forward to sharing this with everybody, and God willing, keeping in touch and building a relationship with you.
Well, first of all, it's my pleasure, like I started with, and thank you so much for all the kind words. Thank you for being a light in the world. And you mentioned along the way that you have dreams and visions. I'd love to hear what your dreams and visions are sometimes. If I can be helpful, please let me know.
That means a lot to me. Have a wonderful new month. Should be full of love and all that you just shared. Ani ledoidi and v'doidi li, and we shall merit to rejoice together in Yerushalayim.
Amen. Looking forward to it.
Chasima v'chasima tova.
Amen. Chen lamar.